welcome back to another episode of the Lightdrop Podcast, where it's just two friends talking creativity and beyond. My name's Jamil.
And my name is Jeff. Jamil,
Jeff.
beginning of the year. Come on, man. We need to talk. We back. We're excited about this episode, y'all. A lot's been happening, but I don't know if you want to open up with what's been going on with you, Jamil, and then I can.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a couple months now, but even still, it feels like we've been in and out of podcast mindset land, if that makes sense. We're coming off of the holidays. Our last episode was our episode we did with Rich Kim.
Yep.
If you haven't seen that, check that out for sure.
The New Year's, yeah.
The holidays came in after, like right around afterwards, and that just kind of, I don't know, at least for me, I felt like I was almost in a bit of a, I don't want to say funk, but just a period of time where I was really trying to hone in on like what's next, for this podcast, for everything, and the holidays is always a good time for that because things slow down. You have that time to think and kind of recover in that way, but we don't want to just do, we love doing these episodes, but we don't want to just do them for the sake of doing them and talking about things that we haven't really contemplated. So I think it's good that time has passed and now it's the new year, and we've been really kind of asking ourselves what's next and how do we answer that, and I think that we settled on a good little topic today to
an exciting topic, a big idea, and I'm excited to like just discuss it because I think that you're one of the people in my life that I want to talk to this about, because I feel like you really think about this stuff. You really just offer an interesting perspective. So looking forward to diving and talking about purpose. We talking about purpose? We talking about purpose?
On purpose.
We talking about purpose.
Purpose.
That's what we talk about.
Purpose in the new year.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody else knows the Allen Iverson. Since AI is taking over, I think you should all revisit that video clip with Allen Iverson talking about practice. Just to get some context, that little joke. But yeah, man, Jamil. So just a little bit about me. Same thing. I think I've been also feeling very, I don't want to say exhausted, but just like out of it. And I felt bad at the beginning of the year because there's this whole idea of, you get up January 1st, just sprint, towards your goals. And I was just very slow at doing stuff. So I just had to take a few weeks to sort of think about stuff for a while, because I wanted this year to feel more intentional. And I felt that the best way for me to approach that would be to sit back and think longer and slower. So it's been a lot of that, a lot of sitting down, contemplating, writing, reorganizing, and just chilling.
Yeah, was it you I was talking about this with the seasons and winter time and just the holidays being that time period where you really want to slow down, but then there's that weird jolt that happens in the new year where we all feel like we need to then dive right back in again. But when you look at what's actually happening in nature, it's actually like the time to continue to slow down a little bit more,
Yeah.
observe. because
Makes sense.
the first day of winter is like a few days before Christmas, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first official day of winter. And winter, just as a season, is nature's way of hunkering down, staying inside, contemplating, getting warm, stocking up, taking stock of what's going on to kind of re-energize yourself for what's, spring, which is a few months away. But then,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, January 1st hits and everybody's like, all right, new year, resolutions, let's
I
dive
run
back
through it.
into it. Holidays are over with. I feel like a lot of people can intuitively feel that, like you said, that wait a minute, I'm not ready to to just
Yeah.
dive back into this. I need a little bit more time to still be active and engaged, of course, but to move on purpose, like you said. And in order to move on purpose, you got to think about it. What is it that I'm wanting, and where am I going, and
Mm-hmm.
and what are the steps I'm going to take to get there, and not just
Exactly.
acting out of impulse and stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely. And just to lead off that, I would like to kind of talk about. I don't know if you have certain experiences, like things that you do. I think everyone has something that they do, or maybe they don't. But I could talk a little bit about what I do whenever I feel kind of lost with figuring out like what am I doing this for, and
Doing what for? Doing art,
doing
this
doing art, doing
podcast, anything?
anything, waking up and pursuing something like what's it's like what's my engine, right? What gets me excited? Yeah, I can. I think I'm gonna dive into that because I feel like it's a very interesting topic. So,
Hmm.
whenever I'm having trouble, especially as a creative, trying to stay motivated, what I try and do is go back to art history class because them folks were killing it, you know. Because you remember when we used to do those still lifes, like how
Oh my
exhausting
god.
it was, and we would maybe put in like I don't know 8 hours, right?
Yeah, just on the
Or like
fundamentals of just the technical aspect of
just
art
wrists,
and yeah.
yeah, the light,
even
and
even art. Wait a minute,
it's a
you're
lot.
talking about also like art history, because art
Yeah, art
history,
history.
art history is the only class ever, and through grade school and college that I've ever fallen asleep in.
Yeah, yeah. It gets. I mean, I think I've had a few art history teachers, professors who've who just talk about our history in an interesting way. They don't talk about it as if they're in a museum. They talk about like the clashes that were going on because even though this is very we think of it as like high end art, it's like the people who were making those paintings, they were petty sometimes. You know, they were very like there a lot of them were like drunks and it was just like this
Who are you
underworld
talking
that
about?
was
You're
going
talking about the
on.
greats. You're talking about
The
the
greats. Yeah. I mean, Michelangelo was a drunk. He drank a lot. Every time he got paid his commissions or something went well, he kind of struggled. He had that internal thing. So, yeah, just it was just compared to that and just talking about art in a very specific way where it's like this is high end art. We don't talk about their faults. Kind of separates you from the actual artist because it makes you feel like they're a genius. So that's what I try and do. I try and look at these artists. I've talked about my boy Leonardo da Vinci a couple of times.
more than a
So
couple times.
a couple of times, right? So I'm gonna let's go back to the 1400s, right? The Renaissance, and talk about the artist's journey, right? Because when you think about their experience, starting from being, uh, just being in a family that could afford to put you next to a good painter, you just had to be kind of chosen, especially back then. You start off 4 to 10 years old, maybe as an apprentice. You do that for a decade. So you have this long, long, long history of just trying your best to even be seen by the masters. And then you get into a workshop, and then you become what you're. I mean, what I think they call them like journeymen, right? And after that, maybe you're good enough to be seen by somebody who's important. But if you're not, then you're just spending your time making random pieces of art. I mean, it wasn't random. It wasn't like it wasn't useful, but it was just compared to like the greats that we know of. A lot of art was just commercial art. You're repainting people's portraits, or you're fixing things.
Mm.
I don't know, things that people could uh, post on their walls to make it a little bit more interesting, or their churches. So it was just this.
It's not so dissimilar to
Yeah, it was just like
nowadays.
a difficult, like, it was basically, yeah, it was a studio, and there was thousands of artists or hundreds of artists working on one piece, right? But when I did my research into that, I started thinking about why did they do that? Because it sounds like a very grueling, and even though personally it's fulfilling to be able to render things very well, learn from the masters. There's a good chance that as an artist back then, you're not going to make it, because if you don't get, I think they called them a Patreon. If you don't get that sponsor, then you're going to be peddling pennies, to make it through. You're not going to get paid enough, basically,
And they
to
didn't have
survive.
like a lot of the greats that we think of. That's a good point, because a lot of them were considered great like posthumously, weren't they? It
Yeah,
wasn't
I mean,
necessarily while they were around that they were these stars. They didn't have social media, right? They weren't these big stars, and they weren't signing other kind of, I don't know, sponsorship deals or anything like that that you would think would come with modern day high profile artists, right? So yeah, it's like
yeah,
what drove them to work on
so work on
such
those
a
things.
grueling
And
thing. Yeah.
exactly. I mean, for so many hours of a day, you're spent sitting looking at something. And I saw this quote about artists back then and what they were actually doing. So instead of creating art that was, as I see it, they would create things that they would want to see, and their own depictions of it in a way that was so divine and so unique that it was poetic and people connected to it. So that's how art became a necessity, because art could depict those things that people really hope for. And yeah, so I think that's what it was. It was just people's connection to the art was much, much greater. It was this thing that I've found to be called divine inspiration. And we've heard of divine right, which is, I think people think that they're entitled to heaven or something like that because they're a king or a queen or something. So they don't really have to do much. Maybe put themselves in a painting or whatever. But divine inspiration is something that's existed forever. Even the first civilizations thought of it as a direct connection to themselves, that if I can tap into uh, a special spirit, a special force that's in the world, I can create through that energy. And people would believe that still. I mean, even now, I mean, we talk about that creative flow. It's just a different name, right? And
Mm.
that's how these artists back then, they were able to do that. So this link it still exists, even if it's just a feeling that you're connected to your art in that way allows you to tap into a subconscious that you maybe might not have been able to. So
Do
that's
you
just
think
all
it
to
was
say. Yeah, it was just an interesting insight that I saw from that path.
do you think it was easier then, 1400s, to tap into that than it is now? I feel like I'm
Mm.
inclined to say it was, because now nothing's changed in essence, right? That's still what many people would agree with you on as being the reason that you want to create art. Like if you really consider yourself an artist, whether it's a musician or a cook or a
Mm-hmm.
painter or something, you want to really create something that comes from your heart, that comes from something greater, and really use that to inspire people. But
Yeah.
the only difference now is there's so many other things tugging at your attention to kind of commercialize it. And so you want to go there with your art, but it's tougher because I still got to get that paycheck and I still got to
Yeah.
you know eat and make
Renew
rent,
my.
so I'm going to do this client work and I'm going to do this and I'm going to make this ad and all of this, and I feel like now it's a little bit more difficult to continuously like dip back into that because of all of these distractions, whereas back then it was either you were commissioned to do something if you were fortunate enough to be like you said an apprentice to a master and you're in that circle,
Mhm.
or in your spare time still making pennies, right? But in your
Yeah.
spare time you're still just making art, like because you're trying to make something that's inspiring to you and to others, and you're working on that, right? Like that is your craft through and through. And so
Right.
what do you think about that? Is that kind of, when you think about art history in that way, like where the artists before us were coming from, and you relate that to what it is that drives you when you want to get up out of bed in the morning, like you said, with your art, and what's pushing you to work on things and improve on things and add different
Yeah.
skills and all of that.
Yeah.
Is
I have a very specific one. So I believe that the creative process is a gift. It's something that um, we all inherently have. And me personally, when I get to do something and I come up with an idea that's interesting, or I figure something out that I wouldn't have seen, sometimes I'll mess up projects. Not mess up projects as in like, you know, this delete all the source
yeah.
files, the working files. What I'm saying is like I'll I'll just push certain things just because it's easier um to render pixels than lighting a whole thing. You can't. I mean, you maybe you can, but that I don't know about. But sometimes that's just what it's about. It's about just pushing an idea a little bit further because graphic design allows you to do that a little bit easier. But doing that and then finding something that I wouldn't have found before, I don't see it as an idea that I thought of. It's something else spoke to me in that certain point, and I got to
Discover
experience
it.
that. Yeah, discover it for like a short second. For some reason, I did something, moved my neck to a certain way, tilted, did a little dance, and now the creative juices are flowing. So yeah, that's just I think about it like that, and I think it keeps me grounded in what I'm doing. Keeps my ego down because I've always been someone who has a very like big ego about certain things. I take a lot of things personally, but when it comes to art and whether or not I make something, I always try and remind myself that I'm not the one who's in charge of this. There's something else that's doing it. I just need to be that vessel to get it out.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that this conversation, this topic, this of purpose is so important because a lot of artists nowadays, in my opinion, in my observation, really have really lost sight of it. Kind of like what we were just talking about with um, the modern day distractions tugging at your creative, what did you call it? The creative divinity, your
Yeah,
divine
divine
inspiration.
inspiration.
You
Yeah,
know, you've got
which
all
is
these things pulling almost like pulling you away from it consistently, and it gets worse and worse the further along you go without allowing yourself to tap back into that. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that artists nowadays, professionals who have been able to create a living for themselves working as graphic designers or visual effects artists or painters or fashion designers, anything like that. We fall into this we fall into this comfort bubble with our jobs, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And there's no a lot of times there's no need to really dip into that divine inspiration for work. It's very much just notes and what the client is looking for and just bringing out that vision in a very technical, almost like objectively
Yeah.
pleasing way. And so what I'm seeing now is with a lot of creatives in situations where now that profession has been taken away from them, that livelihood is gone, whether it be as a freelance artist with less and less work coming, or if you've been working as a graphic designer or a visual effects professional for a company for so long and now all of a sudden layoffs happen and you're without that. In essence, now it's like, okay, well, I've almost lulled myself to sleep about what it really means to be an artist. That decision
Mm-hmm.
I made however many years it was ago to be an artist, um, I knew then, or at least I should have known then, that it's not about being complacent and things being easy. Like you pointed out in the 1400s, right?
Yeah.
They were constantly
Struggling.
grinding. They didn't get much. It's
Yeah.
always been like that. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? But the impact that you can have on other people and the way that you can share your creativity is is a talent that only artists have. And so you think about that purpose, like what am I doing this for? Like what am I actually doing this for? Is it
Mm-hmm.
money? Because I can get money doing a plethora of other things. Or it's like if I have to be an artist, like if that's what it is that gets me out of bed in the morning, like what really is it that I'm doing this for? Who am
Yeah.
I trying to inspire? Who am I trying to move? What difference am I trying to make or impact or influence? And these are deep questions,
Yeah.
but it's like, you know, I feel like a lot of people are kind of floating now and feeling directionless without that 9 to 5 to kind of ground them in something. Now they're
Yeah.
faced with trying to figure this out, and it's scary.
Yeah. And I was gonna say it feels the way that I believe like art has been created in the last maybe, 21st century. It's been cold, a little bit cold because it's now we have all these companies that have their opinions, they have their trends that we need to follow, they have their stories that we need to follow. Everything needs to feel the same. So it's not natural for you as an artist to continue to make somebody else's vision because truly, most of the time, our ideas are good enough to be said. There's no such thing as like a bad idea. Honestly, sometimes it's just execution when it comes to it. But that's something that can be improved. But just the fact that we're feeling all these feelings of kind of this detachment with our work, especially with commercial work, should be a signal for us as artists because they're not going to save us. These companies are not going to save us. They're not thinking about us. So it's important to continuously nurture that connection to your work.
And there's this power now in the 21st century that didn't exist in the 1400s too.
Yeah.
For with social media and with opportunities to reach a large audience quickly, that a lot of artists, I really hope, start to take an interest in, because like I said, for so long you could be doing client work and just have this comfortable job as an artist, as a creative professional, but there's a lot of opportunity to be an artist. There's more opportunity than ever to be an artist. And so it's really about using that creativity to find out how you can do that. And of course, there's, like we've talked about a bunch of times on this show, there you can't ignore being able to make a living, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those things where if you have that purpose of why you want to be an artist, what you want to share with your art and show, and what you enjoy creating, what gives you energy, what's that thing that you can do for 8 hours and feel more energetic than you know at the end of it than you did when you began, right? It's like without having an understanding of what that is, then of course doing anything else to generate income is going to feel burdensome. It's going to feel, you're going to feel jaded towards it because it's not your creative job. It's right.
Yep.
But,
Exactly.
but having that purpose, right? It's like that in and of itself gives you this excitement to in whatever it is that you need to do to pick up the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it from a standpoint of like, okay, yeah, this is me moving forward. Like I don't feel like I'm regressing because I'm not doing the things that I was doing for money, for so
Exactly.
long, right? It's like it really takes some thinking about what that means to you to get to that point. And
Yep.
honestly, like that's I don't want to make it seem like it's easier said than done, or that you and I have figured that out. But that's kind of what we were alluding to, right? When we were talking about the holidays, we were thinking about what's next for us, for the podcast, for all these things. I know a lot of artists are thinking about that too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's a conversation. It's a conversation that needs to be had. It's a what with yourself first and foremost.
Exactly.
You know.
I was gonna say, so my nephew, 7 years old, his name is Jalen. He just learned what racism is. His mom had a conversation and and told him, and he was surprised. He's like, I can't believe people did that. He's like, glad they don't do it
Yeah.
anymore. I'm like, boy. um, but I know at a certain point, I think around maybe 8 or maybe 10, they start thinking about their whys, their purpose. And it kind of got me thinking about him, made me think about when I thought about my purpose as far as like being a creative or asking myself do I want to why do I want to try things basically? Like what's the order of the world? People die at a certain point. I mean, we didn't know that
Mm.
being born that actually happens, but those questions are always important. And I think that life is less about finding the answer and more about finding a better question. So if you
Mm.
can align yourself with a very strong question of like, what is my purpose when it comes to making art, and you keep on revisiting it, it'll give you better questions, and that might lead you to even greater art. So that was just a little something I learned from my nephew thinking about everything. It's like I need to be questioning things a bit more because
Yeah, seeing him realize something that we've for longer than we have known to be this thing of the world, to see him just now learning it. It's like, oh,
yeah,
there was a point in time. I feel like it's so important to define what not only your purpose is for yourself, but what success is in the standpoint of like what do I need to have materially, right? Financially, to be able to go after the things that excite me, right?
yeah,
Because I think that that's where a lot of creatives get tripped up. A lot of people get tripped up is in thinking that okay, how much money do I want? Right, I want a lot. You know what I mean? To be able to do the things that I want to
A
do.
million
A
or a
million,
billion. I don't
a
know.
billion,
A trillion.
or a hundred thousand, 200,000.
Yeah.
But it's like, what are you chasing? Are you chasing that number, or are you chasing your purpose? Because when you're chasing your purpose, that number is a very specific number that you know that number, and you know that that's what you need to get to in order to facilitate your purpose. But without any kind of set purpose or goals, you're just constantly chasing more, right? And then
Hmm.
there's you're always going to be chasing more because there's nothing to get, there's nothing to finish,
Yeah.
right? In this lifetime, you know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
always going to be more to do, more to do, more to do. And
Yeah.
so
You can't hit a target you're not aiming for.
exactly,
Basically. Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, I've thought that's I like thinking in that way because it's a very kind of tangible way of seeing things, without lacking that big picture view of what we're working towards. We fall into this pattern of just material seeking, like
Hmm.
like serial success seeking, to where you hit a milestone. Oh, I need more. And you hit a milestone. Oh, I need more. I need more. And you're never happy, right? Because that's what it comes down to. Is like, how can I be happy? How
Yep.
can I help other people be happy?
Yep. And
Gotta
I
have some
like
kind of
that.
purpose.
I was gonna say I like that you talked about it being you giving yourself a very almost not tangible, but like something that you can get a hold of and use it to motivate yourself when it comes to your process for aligning with your purpose, basically, where you're like, okay, I have a certain number or goal, and that's how I stay aligned with what I'm trying to do. Because it can be very difficult to try and pursue something like that, where it's like I don't know where it's going to end, and it's it's kind of jarring, almost, I would say, to
Hmm.
to just be existing with no direction,
No
almost, especially if
purpose.
you purpose, no
No
purpose.
purpose. I mean, when you think about it, purpose is this combination of where we're going and what excites us, like where we're going and what's important to us. Those
Hmm.
two things combined is essentially what your purpose is, you know? And so, one of our biggest challenges is making sure that we're not just continuously going without knowing what we're going for.
Yeah.
Like that's the hard part, is to really like lock in on that.
Hmm.
Um and it really just takes a little bit of thought. Like, I feel like that's the whole point that we wanted to kind of bring this topic up, right? Is just, if you haven't thought about this, if you're feeling like you're navigating without a compass lately, whether you're junior or senior, affected by instability in the industry, you know, allow yourself the grace to just kind of like take a step back and assess, really what you want. And it could be hard. It could be an easy question for some. It could be a really hard question for others.
Yeah. And to add on to that, I would say giving yourself some grace when it comes to these things, where these are big questions to be asking yourself, and it's not something that you figure out in a day. uh, Jamil and I feel like you and I talk about this a lot because you and I are almost aligned in that certain way, where it's like this is a big thing for us, but there's some people out there who are by themselves. They're somewhere in the middle of nowhere, working remotely on a project, and maybe they might not see as many people, but it's important to give yourself grace and to know that uh, there are definitely disruptors out there that are keeping you from organically, knowing your purpose. There's definitely
Yeah.
between social media, between commercial trends, between academic habits or whatever you want to call them, things that are just archaic. You have to give yourself some grace when it comes to these things because it
Yeah.
takes a while.
And I think the final part to this too is once you've once you've established what that is for yourself, it's like where do you want to see things in 5, 10, 15 years, whether it be in your life or just as the broader collective industry, right? What does the creative industry look like in 10, 15, 20 years? What do you want it to look like, right? Do
Mm-hmm.
you know, I can't see a future where we just continue to use our talents solely for the purpose of bringing out client visions and selling and creating products and selling products and advertising and so on and so forth. You know,
Yeah.
I think that the skill set that creative professionals have built up within an industry that's been like that for decades is such a powerful skill set to now be able to branch off and to really kind of branch off with purpose to say, okay, here's this amazing creative and technical skill set that I have to create visual art. That now it's like, what do people want to see? What do I want to see? What am I going to make? What do I want other people to be empowered to make? Do I want people to
Mm-hmm.
feel limited? Like it doesn't exist yet, but what does that look like? I
Yeah.
think that that's the next step to kind of think about when once you found your purpose. It's like, okay, what about everyone else? What about all the other artists that are that just want to make art, man? Like, like in the 1400s, like we were saying, yeah, they were
Mm-hmm.
living, you know, whatever the conditions they were in
Yeah. It was
weren't
pretty bad.
easy, but it was
Yeah.
pretty bad.
It's pretty
but
bad.
but at least it was simple. It
Yeah.
was like I'm making art. I'm not making a lot, but I'm an artist. You
That's
know
what
what
I
I
do.
mean? This is
Yeah.
what I
And
do.
what the beautiful thing was that they they didn't have a long lifespan. That's not the beautiful part of it, but they they had this devotion to it, and it comes back to like religion and their devotion to their faith, but it was such a deep connection that they were able to spend 14, 15 hours a day devoted to this thing because their purpose was so great as far as
Mhm.
they're concerned and their artwork.
Yeah,
And
and
yeah, it
they knew,
was
like they never
a
forgot
ride.
from the onset of them getting involved in that, like you said, to become an apprentice and to you know do these paintings and so on and so forth. Like they knew from the get go, like what that life was gonna be like.
Mm-hmm.
That there was
Right.
gonna be this constant recreation or this constant search for something that's gonna keep me passionate about doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and nothing's changed in this modern day except more and more things tugging you in more and more directions to just make it harder to like really get back to your roots of am I doing this for?
Yeah, I love it. So, are we gonna talk? Did we talk about the one thing? I want to.
We did a whole episode on it. You want to, because
No, because I
we
mean,
love that book.
yeah, that book was amazing, and I think we're just revisiting because it is the your purpose is the one thing that could obviously change a lot of things. And I think about myself as when I was a younger artist and I wanted to I felt like I had more purpose when I was less experienced, if that made
Hmm.
sense. Because I
Yeah,
was
that makes
so
perfect sense.
yeah, because I was like I want to make everything. there's no limits. I thought that I was going to become famous, and when I when I think about that time, I kind of also have to give myself a little break because when you don't know, you don't know, but there's also the beauty of it. So
Mm-hmm.
I try and revisit that work and just smile at the ambition that I had. It's just like that. But what I was gonna say was that like when I revisit that time, definitely it's very positive because I felt like I knew what I wanted to do,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like this was the best thing that I could give the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad that every now and then I still feel that way. It's definitely harder with commercial work, waking up and sticking to a schedule, going to meetings. But I believe that the only reason that I'm still so connected to the work is because I'm able to revisit this question every once in a while, what is my
Yeah.
purpose with this work?
Yeah. Well, in the book, in the author of the one thing, he talks about that counterbalance, right? He
Mm-hmm.
kind of clarifies that difference between having a work-life balance that becomes so important as you get older. You don't really need to worry about that when you're first getting started in your career, but as you become more and more senior and more responsibilities, you feel like you have to maintain this balance of things.
Mm-hmm.
But the author points out really it's more about a counterbalance because you can only give your attention to one thing at a time. Like,
Yeah.
and that one thing should be your purpose. That one most important thing to you should be what gets your attention and what drives your actions and your productivity day in and day out should be based on that focus of what my purpose is. But then when you dive into that, you understand, okay, you know, I also have this that I want to do, and I also have this that I want to do, and I also need to make sure
Mm-hmm.
that I continue to improve my relationships with my family and my friends and all these other things that
Yeah.
are important to me. So then that becomes my one thing. And then you pull over and it's this constant like readjusting of your focus and your priority, but you still have to kind of have this driving purpose of like why.
Mm-hmm. Because
And
yeah, it almost, I mean, it anchors you in a way.
exactly.
Uh, and it's, I was, uh, I feel like it can also be a selfish thing sometimes where you feel as if you're almost robbing yourself to focus on one thing, right? Where you're like, why aren't I multitasking right now? It's like I work
Hmm.
at this job for 8 hours. How come I can't answer emails while I'm working, get on a call, and do it all because I can? But
Hmm.
you're right. I mean, you only have two eyes. You can only focus on one thing, and it's almost a disservice to those tasks to try and split them up because I mean, it just ends up taking longer, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. I think this is a topic that we should definitely continue to poke at over the course of the year. You know,
Absolutely.
I
No,
definitely
this
want to
is.
this.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I definitely want to take what we talked about, implement it, because all the things that we've discussed in past episodes, we get we work on them a little bit, you know what I mean? But then we also we always like revisit them again like 2-3 months later and we're like, we talked about this, but then I
We didn't
went
do
back
that
to
thing.
multitasking. I went back to multitasking and I burnt myself out again and we talked about this. but
Right.
I but something about this topic though feels like feels like ground zero, you know? It's like starting here. We should start here, talk about this, and then kind of talk about something else that we may have wanted to revisit or talk about something. But it starts with this purpose, because this purpose is what's going to give us that focus on that one thing to get our juices flowing every morning, like you said, to get us up and get us alive, and regardless of what's happening in your work circumstances, your work life circumstances. It's like really heavy when you talk about people who are like happy, like absolutely happy people. It almost if you're not that, it's almost hard to fathom that somebody could just wake up every morning and just be so excited to work on whatever it is that they're working on, regardless of what their financial situation is or what obstacles they may be dealing with in their personal life, and so on and so forth. But it starts with having that purpose and really having that set thing that drives you, because everything that you do from there is like, yeah, I'm getting closer, and this is exciting to me, and this is like, yeah, this is tough, but I'm gonna overcome it because it's important. My purpose is important. Like,
yeah, I'm working on a special thing.
Yeah, exactly.
This thing was it. Like like I said, it's like a gift. I always remember, like I always feel so grateful whenever I have that small feeling that what I'm doing right now on this computer is something that 13-year-old me would have been so excited about.
Mm-hmm.
You would have been like, yo, you got your own computer? It's like, you are living, bro.
Damn, look at me.
Hey, you didn't have to LimeWire the software? Oh my God.
Yeah, we'll be back on this topic for sure, man. We still got way more to talk about. We still got way more to experience too. This is only January. I have high hopes for this year, for all the things that we're involved in.
Yeah. No, this is going to be a good year. I also feel super focused. I feel as if I have kind of realigned a bit with my one thing, but revisiting it with you always, like, it puts me back into perspective that I need to be, because I think I've always teetered around keeping my life simpler, but I've never done it to a point where it's extremely, where it's like, what is my one thing? Maybe I'll usually have like 3 or 4 things, but I've never just had like one thing. So excited about talking through purpose this year, man. This is going to be a very exciting year for both of us, I believe.
100%, man. This is going to be a year of big growth. I'm determined to make that the case. You guys are going to see us talking about this. It's been a minute since our last podcast episode where it was just me and you, Jeff. I think the last time we did an episode, you had a wig on.
I did, yep. Grew out my hair.
It was like Halloween. I think that was months ago. But yeah, I feel like we kind of hit a new gear. We're ready to kind of contemplate on some things and bring that back to the podcast, share with y'all. But more importantly, if you're listening, like, we want to talk. We want to kind of open up these conversations. And we got some things coming to kind of help facilitate that. But, talk to us in the comments. Talk to us, find me on LinkedIn, anything. And, you know what I mean? We can kind of open this conversation up, because in the way that Jeff and I find new answers over the course of these episodes, I appreciate that you and I have that, but I know that a lot of people don't. They don't have that person to talk to get there. So,
and I would say, obviously subscribe, follow, comment, do all the things that you can, because it does give us a little bit of push, I guess, to see, like, if you're letting us know in the comment section what you're thinking. I think it really pushes us to keep making. We're always going to do it. We're going to keep making better episodes. But I think when we get that feedback from y'all, it really helps out. So make sure you comment, respond. Let us know your thoughts on the topic of purpose or any other purpose. I mean, any other conversation that we have on the Lightdrop Podcast.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, is that it? Is that the pod, Jamil?
It's the pod.